A single ticket promises answers, then vanishes into doubt. Welcome to Clue Law. I am your host, Vale. Drop a comment with your listening location. Your presence matters. Into the mystery. If there's a thing you can count on in Nero Wolfe's brownstone, besides orchids, beer, and a cook who treats a saucepan like a sacred vessel, it's that the place is built to keep the world out. The front door's a boundary line, the office is a customs checkpoint, and Fritz Brenner's dinner bell is the only siren Wolfe recognizes. So when the world comes barging in anyway, it usually does it with a flourish, a feint, a gun, a sob, or, if it's feeling fancy, a check with too many zeros. This time it came in as a slip of pasteboard no bigger than a man's thumb, and it managed to disrupt Wolfe before noon. It started harmlessly enough. I was at my desk in the office on the ground floor, doing what I do when Wolfe isn't talking, reading the morning paper with my feet up and pretending I wasn't also listening for the elevator to clank. Because when Wolfe's upstairs and silent too long, it usually means he's thinking, which is his version of exercise, and twice as dangerous. I'd just finished a column about a councilman who'd been caught taking bribes in the men's room of a Broadway theater. New York never wastes a good setting when the doorbell rang. Not the telephone, the doorbell, which is always a little personal in that house. People can call you from anywhere. Coming to the brownstone means you've decided you deserve the trouble. I went to the hall, opened the front door, and found a man I didn't recognize, holding his hat the way a man holds a hat when he's not sure whether he's about to be admitted or arrested. He was in his late 40s, maybe, with the kind of neatness that comes from careful choices rather than money. A gray overcoat brushed clean, shoes shined but old, face shaved close, hair trimmed in a way that said he wasn't vain but didn't like surprises. He had a narrow mouth and eyes that looked like they'd spent their whole life assessing exits. He said, "Archie Goodwin? That's me. You're early or late, depending on who you are." He gave a faint smile that didn't reach the eyes. "My name is Lyle Pomeroy. I need to see Mr. Wolfe." I stepped aside enough to block the gap with my body. "Mr. Wolfe needs a lot of things: sleep, peace, and people who don't need to see him. You've got an appointment?" "No." "Then you've got nerve." "That helps, but it's not a guarantee." I looked him over again. No bulge under the coat that suggested a gun. No nervous twitch that suggested a lunatic. Just tension, tight and orderly. He said, "I have something that belongs in his hands." I almost asked if it was a subpoena, but he reached into his coat pocket and produced a small envelope. Plain, not business, not social. The kind you get from the corner stationery store because you don't want anyone to remember buying it. He held it out like it might bite him. I took it and didn't open it yet. "And what's in here, Mr. Pomeroy? A lock of hair, a confession, a coupon for free steak?" He swallowed once. "A ticket." That didn't help. For what? He didn't answer. He just stood there, stiff as if the wrong word might turn him into a statue for good. I sighed and tipped my head toward the hall. "All right. Step in. Don't touch anything. Not the umbrella stand, not the stairs, not the atmosphere." He stepped into the hall and paused like he expected the floor to complain. I closed the door behind him, and while he was still deciding whether he should take his hat off, I said, "Wait here," and carried the envelope back into the office. Wolfe wasn't in it. That was no surprise. It was still before noon, which meant he was upstairs in the plant rooms, tending orchids like a high priest tending gods who smell better. I set the envelope on Wolfe's desk and stared at it for a second. A ticket. I didn't like tickets. Tickets meant theaters, races, trains, planes, or cops, none of which belonged in Wolfe's office unless money or trouble was attached, and trouble is always attached. Then I did what any loyal employee would do. I opened it. Inside was a single card, thick, cream-colored, with black printing and a red line across the top. It was the kind of ticket you get from a reputable institution, the kind that expects you to keep it flat and present it without fingerprints. On it, in neat type, were the words, "Admit 1, private viewing, Garnett and Sloane auctioneers. Thursday, 8 p.m., lot 77, the Barnes Ledger." Strictly by invitation. No name, no seat number. Just that, and a small embossed seal in the corner that said G&S like it was proud of itself. I whistled softly. Garnett and Sloane did not invite people to private viewings unless those people had the money to make the lots feel appreciated. They dealt in rare books, art, manuscripts, things that belonged behind glass and made ordinary men feel like they'd been born too late. The Barnes Ledger meant nothing to me. I've been accused of being bright, but my mind has a limited attic space for obscure treasures. Still, if a man showed up at Wolfe's door with a ticket for a private viewing, it meant one of three things. He wanted Wolfe to go, he wanted Wolfe to stop someone else from going, or he wanted Wolfe to tell him why the ticket mattered. I slid the card back into the envelope and took it into the hall where Lyle Pomeroy was standing like he was trying not to breathe. "All right," I said. "Now we're getting somewhere. I'll see if Mr. Wolfe feels like being disturbed. That's not a sure thing." He nodded, but his eyes flicked past me toward the stairs, as if he was measuring how long it would take to run up them. I went to the office door and called up the shaft, "Mr. Wolfe, a visitor." From above, faint but unmistakable, came Wolfe's voice, resonant and irritated. "Mr. Goodwin, I'm engaged." "Sure," I called back. "But the visitor brought a ticket." There was a pause. You could almost hear the orchids holding their breath. Then Wolfe said, "A ticket for what?" I leaned into the doorway and looked at the envelope as if reading it might produce an answer with manners. "Garnett and Sloane, private viewing, lot 77, the Barnes Ledger." Another pause, shorter this time. Wolfe said, "Bring him to the office." That, right there, was the first sign the ticket had done more than get ink on paper. Nero Wolfe did not invite unknown men into his office on the basis of pasteboard unless the pasteboard tickled something in his head. I escorted Pomeroy in, and he moved with the careful slowness of a man who's been told not to touch anything and has decided that includes air molecules. I gestured toward the red leather chair across from Wolfe's desk. "Sit," I said. "Mr. Wolfe will be down when he's ready." Pomeroy sat, but it wasn't a rest. It was a posture. His hands folded on his knee like he'd practiced. He stared at the rug, then at the shelves, then at the desk, then at me, as if deciding which object might become a weapon in the next 5 minutes. I took my own chair, lit a cigarette, and blew smoke toward the ceiling where it could offend the least number of people. "You said you have something that belongs in Wolfe's hands," I told him. "You weren't kidding. The question is why. Did you steal it? Find it? Win it in a game of poker with a librarian?" His mouth tightened. "It was delivered to me this morning." "By whom?" "I don't know." I gave him a look. "That's a terrific start." He held it. "It was in my mailbox. No return address. No note. Then why bring it here?" His eyes moved to my cigarette. "Because it isn't for me." "Could have fooled me. It was in your mailbox." His hands tightened slightly. "My mailbox was used." I leaned back. "Okay. Used by who?" He stared straight ahead. "Someone who wants me to go to that viewing." "And? And if I go, something will happen." "Something good?" I asked, because optimism is occasionally worth an experiment. His laugh was small and dry. "No." "Then don't go." His gaze snapped to me. "I can't do that." That was interesting. "Why not?" He hesitated, and for the first time I saw what was underneath the neatness. Fear, not wild, but precise, like a man who's already pictured the worst possible outcome and is now living inside it. He said, "Because I believe the ticket is a test." "A test of what?" "Of whether I can be made to do what I'm told." I nodded slowly. And what happens if you fail? He didn't answer. His silence had weight. Before I could push it, the elevator clanked and Wolfe came in through the door at the rear, like a judge entering the courtroom, unhurried, confident, annoyed that anyone has dared require his presence. He wore his yellow silk shirt and black vest, and he looked as if he'd been carved out of indulgence and intelligence. His eyes went to Pomeroy, then to me, then to the envelope on the desk. "Mr. Pomeroy," Wolfe said, settling into his chair behind the desk with the heavy grace of a large cat. "You have disturbed me." Pomeroy stood, then thought better of it and half sat, half hovered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe opened the envelope, removed the ticket, and regarded it the way he regarded most things, as if it were either trivial or lying. His eyes moved over the printed words and something faint, very faint, shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. He looked up. "You said it was delivered to you." "Yes." "Why?" Pomeroy's throat bobbed. "I don't know." Wolfe's lips compressed. "Mr. Goodwin, has the world truly gone mad, or is it merely lazy? People come to me with ignorance and expect it to be remedied by my time." I said. He also brought tension, which came free with the ticket. Wolfe ignored me. "Mr. Pomeroy, tell me what you have not told my assistant. Not what you think I wish to hear. What is true?" Pomeroy's fingers clutched the brim of his hat. "I work for Garnett and Sloan." That earned him an eyebrow from Wolfe. "In what capacity?" "Administrative," Pomeroy said quickly. "Cataloging support, scheduling. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not important." Wolfe's eyes returned to the ticket. "Lot 77, the Barnes Ledger." Pomeroy nodded and his voice dropped. "It is not supposed to be in the catalogue." Wolfe looked at him sharply. "Explain." Pomeroy swallowed again. "There was no intention to sell it publicly. It is contested." "Contested," Wolfe repeated, tasting the word. "By whom?" Pomeroy hesitated. Wolfe's tone became colder, which in his case meant more polite. "Mr. Pomeroy." Pomeroy said, "By people who have money, and by people who have influence, and by people who have both, and are used to getting what they want without needing a ticket." Wolfe leaned back slightly, his hands resting on the desk as if he could pin the room in place with his fingertips. "And you fear these people?" "Yes." "Why?" Pomeroy's eyes met Wolfe's, and for a second he looked like a man standing on a ledge, deciding whether the fall would hurt less than the staying. He said, "Because I believe they have already decided that if the Barnes Ledger becomes visible, truly visible, it will ruin someone. And they have decided I am a convenient lever." Wolfe's gaze did not soften. "You believe, you suspect, you imagine. These are not facts." Pomeroy's voice cracked just once. "Facts are expensive, Mr. Wolfe. I don't have many." Wolfe held his gaze, and then, almost reluctantly, he asked the question that mattered. "What is the Barnes Ledger?" Pomeroy drew in a breath. "It's a book. A ledger kept by a man named Nathaniel Barnes in the late 19th century. He was connected. He recorded transactions, payments, names." "Names of whom?" Wolfe asked. Pomeroy shook his head. "I haven't seen it. Only one person has. Officially. The specialist, Dr. Celia Rudge." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And unofficially?" Pomeroy's mouth tightened again. "Unofficially, I don't know, but the ticket suggests someone wants me to be present when it is shown, and if I am present, I may be blamed for what follows." Wolfe set the ticket down on the desk with care, as if it might leave a stain. He steepled his fingers. "Mr. Pomeroy," he said, "you have come to me because you are frightened and because you have been placed, as you say, in the position of a lever. That is not uncommon. What is uncommon is the object." He glanced at me. "Mr. Goodwin, you have heard of the Barnes Ledger?" I shrugged. "Nope, my education didn't cover 19th century dirt merchants. Wolfe made a sound that was not quite a snort, not quite a sigh. I have. That was the second disruption. The first was Wolfe agreeing to see him. The second was Wolfe admitting, voluntarily, that he knew something. Pomeroy's eyes widened. Then you know why. Wolfe held up a hand. I know enough to be curious. Curiosity is not charity. I said, sure, it's a moral failing. Wolfe ignored me again. Mr. Pomeroy, you will tell me everything you know of this matter. Every name you have heard, every whisper, every glance you have noticed. You will not omit something because it seems trivial. In my experience, trivialities are often the spine of the beast. Pomeroy nodded too quickly, as if grateful for an instruction. Yes, I will. Wolfe's eyes drifted briefly to the door, as if assessing the integrity of his brownstone against the encroaching world. Then he said softly and distinctly, "And you will leave that ticket with me." Pomeroy's fingers loosened on his hat. "Of course." Wolfe's gaze settled back on him. "You are not, however, relieved of the necessity to attend that viewing." Pomeroy jerked, "But—" Wolfe's voice remained calm. "If you are correct that it is a test, then refusal is an answer. I prefer to know the question before I answer it." Pomeroy's face went pale. "You're saying I should go." "I'm saying," Wolfe corrected, "that I will decide, and you, Mr. Pomeroy, have already placed yourself under my jurisdiction by entering this house." That did it. The brownstone had been breached, and Wolfe, who hated movement and surprises, was already building a cage out of words. I flicked ash into the tray and watched Pomeroy swallow whatever protest he'd been about to make. Wolfe's voice turned brisk. "Now, begin. Who is Dr. Celia Rudge, and why is she the only person permitted to see the ledger?" Pomeroy took a breath, and as he began to talk about auction rooms, private collectors, a specialist with a sharp reputation, and a ledger that could burn names that had survived a century, I sat back in my chair and had the uncomfortable feeling that the ticket wasn't just an invitation. It was a hand reaching into Wolfe's sanctum. And Wolfe, for reasons he hadn't yet explained, had decided to close his fingers around it. Pomeroy began the way a man begins when he's decided the cliff behind him is higher than the one in front. Fast, careful, and with his eyes always checking whether the listener is laughing. "Dr. Celia Rudge is our outside specialist," he said. "Manuscripts, ledgers, private account books, provenance disputes. She's difficult, but she's thorough." Wolfe's eyelids lowered a fraction. "Define difficult." Pomeroy's mouth tightened. "She doesn't compromise. With anyone. She won't certify a thing unless she has seen it, handled it, compared paper and ink and binding, and she won't bend because a client threatens to take their business elsewhere. That's why Garnett and Sloan uses her. When she says something is authentic, people stop arguing and start paying." "And the Barnes ledger?" Wolfe asked. "It surfaced 3 weeks ago," Pomeroy said. "Not publicly. It was brought to us privately by Mr. Damon Sloan." That made Wolfe's eyes flick up. "One of the principals?" "Yes. He's the Sloan." Pomeroy swallowed. "It came in a locked portfolio, not even in a proper case. Mr. Sloan instructed that it not be entered into the catalogue, not be spoken of beyond a very short list. He said it was to be offered to select parties only. Quietly. And nevertheless a printed ticket exists," Wolfe said, naming it as a lot. Pomeroy nodded, and the motion was more misery than agreement. "That's what frightened me. The ticket means someone has forced it into visibility, either by Mr. Sloane's decision, which would be uncharacteristic, or by someone else's interference." I glanced at Wolfe. He didn't move, but the air in the room had changed. When Wolfe is merely annoyed, the office feels like a comfortable prison. When he's interested, it feels like a courtroom before the judge speaks. Wolfe said, "Who's on this short list?" Pomeroy hesitated, and his eyes flicked to me. like he wanted to know whether I was part of the furniture or part of the threat. I blew smoke and said, "I'm housebroken. Go ahead." Pomeroy licked his lips. Mr. Damon Sloane, Mr. Garnett, Victor Garnett, Dr. Rudge, and myself because I schedule viewings and coordinate the secure room. "Only 4, Wolfe murmured, "and yet the ticket has found its way to you." Pomeroy nodded again. "The secure room is on the 3rd floor at Garnett and Sloane. It has 2 keys. One is held by Mr. Garnett, the other by Mr. Sloane. They keep it that way because neither trusts the other completely." He said that last part with the flat certainty of a man who has watched enough polite smiles to know what's behind them. Wolfe's mouth twitched, not quite approval, not quite amusement. "A healthy arrangement," Pomeroy continued. "Dr. Rudge viewed the ledger 2 days after it arrived. I was present only as a witness because she insists on it. Someone from the firm to verify chain of custody. She spent 2 hours with it. And her conclusion? She said it was genuine," Pomeroy said, and then, after a beat, "and she said it was dangerous." That got my attention. Specialists don't usually include moral judgments with their invoices. Wolfe said, "In what terms did she say this?" Pomeroy's voice lowered. "She said, 'If you sell this, you will ruin people who have never been ruined before, and you will invite people who ruin others for sport.' Then she asked Mr. Sloane who exactly would be invited to see it." Wolfe leaned back an inch, which for him is the equivalent of pacing. And he told her it was not her concern. Wolfe's eyes turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, you will take note. A woman with a reputation for rigor has expressed an ethical apprehension." "Noted," I said. "In red ink." Wolfe returned to Pomeroy. "Proceed." Pomeroy's hands worked the brim of his hat until it almost became a different shape. That was the official part. The unofficial part is, there have been pressures, calls, visits, not to me directly at first, to Mr. Sloane, to Mr. Garnett. "From whom?" Wolfe asked. "I don't have names," Pomeroy said quickly. "Not at first. But last week I heard Mr. Garnett arguing with someone in his office. The door was shut, but Mr. Garnett was raised enough that it carried. He said, 'You can't buy silence twice. You pay once and hope it holds.'" I raised my eyebrows at Wolfe, and he gave me nothing. The man could hear a confession and still look like he was considering soup. Pomeroy went on, "2 days ago, when Dr. Rudge came for her second viewing, she insisted on a second inspection to compare a watermark she had photographed. There was an incident." Wolfe said, "What incident?" The portfolio was not where it should have been. Pomeroy's voice trembled slightly, and he tightened it back under control. It was still in the secure room, but it had been moved. The seals on the inner wrapping, wax seals with the firm's stamp, were broken and remade. "Not well." "Interesting," Wolfe said softly. Pomeroy's eyes met his. Dr. Rudge noticed immediately. She became furious. She said the chain of custody had been compromised, and she refused to continue until Mr. Sloane and Mr. Garnett were both present. It took 40 minutes to assemble them. They argued, of course. "Of course," Wolfe repeated. Pomeroy swallowed. "Dr. Rudge told them someone had accessed it. Mr. Garnett insisted the keys never left his possession. Mr. Sloane said the same. Dr. Rudge said then someone had entered the secure room without the keys." Wolfe's eyelids lowered again. "And you?" "I checked the room," Pomeroy said. The lock showed no damage, no forced entry, but there is a service panel behind one of the shelves. Electrical access. It can be opened from the hallway if one knows how. It was slightly ajar. I felt my cigarette pause halfway to my mouth. That kind of detail wasn't a flourish. It was a hinge. Wolfe said, "Was this reported to the police?" Pomeroy gave a short, humorless laugh. "No. Mr. Sloane said it would be handled internally." Mr. Garnett agreed too quickly. Dr. Rudge said she would withdraw her certification unless she was satisfied the ledger had not been altered. Altered? Wolfe's voice sharpened. Is it possible to alter such an object without detection? Dr. Rudge says any tampering leaves evidence, Pomeroy said, but she also said it wouldn't take much. A missing page, a substituted name, a smear of ink. If the ledger is what they claim, a single alteration could change who is ruined and who is spared. Wolfe's gaze went distant for a moment, as if he were looking at a ledger no one else could see. Then he said, "You have still not explained why the ticket came to you." Pomeroy's face tightened. Because after that incident, I began receiving calls at home. Not threatening at first. Questions. Where would the viewing be held? Who would attend? What time would the ledger be on display? I refused to answer. I said I had no authority. Then yesterday evening, when I left the office, a man followed me for 6 blocks. A description, Wolfe said instantly. Pomeroy shook his head. I didn't see his face clearly. He stayed behind me. Medium height, dark coat, hat. He wanted me to know he was there. And this morning, Wolfe prompted. This morning the ticket was in my mailbox, Pomeroy said, and when I went down to retrieve it, there was a small object beside it. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. What object? Pomeroy's hand went to his coat pocket, and for an instant I tensed. Old habits and all that. But he drew out something small and dull and set it on Wolfe's desk with the kind of care men reserve for dead things. It was a wax seal, broken. The imprint on it, faint but legible, was G&S. I let out a low whistle before I could stop myself. So they're not just inviting you, I said. They're telling you they can reach what's supposed to be locked. Pomeroy nodded, his eyes fixed on the seal as if it might crawl away. Yes. Wolfe looked at the broken wax without touching it. And by bringing this to me, you have chosen to make yourself useful rather than obedient. Pomeroy's mouth twitched. I chose to survive. Wolfe sat very still. When he spoke, his voice was almost mild, which is when you should watch him most closely. Mr. Pomeroy, he said, there are persons who believe the world is arranged for their convenience. They are offended by obstacles as if nature itself were insolent. A ledger that threatens them is an obstacle. A man who could be blamed for its exposure is convenient. He paused, then added, You have brought into my house an instrument of coercion. That is unacceptable. Pomeroy looked stricken. I didn't mean... Wolfe raised a hand. Silence. Your intention is immaterial. The fact remains. I exhaled smoke and said, meaning somebody has already used the brownstone as a mailbox, metaphorically. Wolfe doesn't like that. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me, and I knew I'd translated correctly. He said, Mr. Goodwin. Yes, sir. You will go to Garnett and Sloane today. You will see the secure room. You will meet Dr. Rudge. You will speak with Mr. Garnett and Mr. Sloane, if possible. You will learn the identities of those who are to attend this private viewing. Pomeroy's eyes widened. You're taking this? Wolfe's gaze held him like a thumb on a butterfly. I have not said that. I have said I dislike intrusion. He nodded toward the broken seal, and I dislike incompetence. Whoever has done this has been careless enough to leave evidence and presumptuous enough to believe it will intimidate. Those are failings I cannot ignore. Pomeroy's voice shook. If you interfere, they will do what they can, Wolfe said. So will I. He turned to me again. Mr. Goodwin, take Mr. Pomeroy upstairs to the front room. Provide him with coffee. Keep him there. Do not permit him to leave the house unless I instruct it. Pomeroy started to protest, then stopped. The idea of being kept inside Wolfe's brownstone probably felt like being held in a bank vault by a man who collects locks. I stood. Come on, Mr. Pomeroy. Wolfe's hospitality includes detention. You'll get used to it. As I guided him toward the stairs, I felt the case tighten like a knot, a ledger that could ruin people. Broken seals, a ticket that wasn't an invitation so much as a shove. And behind it, somewhere, was a person who believed that if you tugged the right string, a man like Lyle Pomeroy would dance. The trouble was, that string had just been tied to Nero Wolfe's chair. Getting Lyle Pomeroy upstairs was like escorting a nervous cat into a room full of rocking chairs. He kept looking over his shoulder as if the front door might open by itself and let in a pair of hands. I parked him in the front room on the first floor, the one Wolfe used for waiting clients when he was in a mood to make them consider their sins. Fritz appeared as if summoned by the scent of unease and produced coffee with the solemnity of a man performing a rite. Pomeroy took a cup like it might steady his pulse by contact. "If you hear shouting," I told him, "it's just Wolfe thinking out loud." He didn't smile. I went back to the office long enough to get my hat and coat and to confirm that Wolfe was still planted behind his desk, which he was, looking at the broken seal as if it were an insect pinned under glass. "Any special instructions?" I asked. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Do not be seduced by their atmosphere. Auction houses cultivate an illusion of inevitability. Remember that it is merely commerce draped in velvet." "I'll try not to buy anything," I said. He ignored that too. "Telephone me from there after you have spoken with Dr. Rudge." I left before he could add a lecture on the moral corruption of men who collect paper. On the way downtown, I kept turning the ticket over in my head. A private viewing isn't a circus, it's choreography. People are invited because they're expected to bid, to boast, or to bleed quietly into their handkerchiefs. If someone had jammed the Barnes Ledger into the program, it meant they wanted witnesses, or they wanted panic, or both. Garnett and Sloan sat on a side street off Madison in a building that tried to look like a bank without admitting it. The lobby was marble and restraint. A receptionist behind a desk that could have been a coffin asked my name as if she already knew it and wanted to watch me squirm. "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Here to see Dr. Celia Rudge." Her eyes flicked up and down my coat with the faint disapproval of someone trained to prefer subdued wealth. "Do you have an appointment?" "I have a talent for appearing," I said. "Tell her it's about the ledger." That did it. The receptionist's expression shifted, just a millimeter, like a locked drawer sliding open. She made a call, murmured, listened, then said, "Please take the elevator to the 4th floor. The attendant will direct you." There was an attendant. Of course there was. He looked at me as if he had been issued by the building along with the lighting fixtures. He pressed the button and watched the numbers climb, as though counting could prevent crime. On the 4th floor, the air changed. Less perfume, more paper. The corridor was lined with framed auction posters and subdued photographs of famous lots. Shakespeare folios, first editions, a letter from Lincoln. People came here to stand near history and pretend it meant something about them. The attendant led me to a door with frosted glass. A brass plate read, "Dr. Celia Rudge, Consultant." He knocked and vanished like a trained ghost. "Come," a woman's voice called. I went in. Dr. Celia Rudge was sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been selected for its ability to keep secrets. She was in her late 30s or early 40s, hard to pin down because her face didn't offer soft edges. Dark hair pulled back tight, cheekbones sharp enough to slice paper, eyes the color of old slate. She wore no jewelry except a watch that looked expensive and functional. She looked up once and took me in, and I could tell immediately that she was the kind of person who never needed to ask where you'd been. She would infer it from your shoes. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. That surprised me. "We've met." "No." Her tone suggested she didn't waste time on unnecessary verbs. "But Nero Wolfe's assistant is widely described. Your voice also matches." "Glad to hear my reputation beats me to places," I said. "I'm here because something is wrong with your ledger." A flicker, not in her face but in the air around her, like someone had tightened a wire. "It isn't my ledger." "I know," I said. But you're the one who knows what it is. She leaned back slightly. And you're here because Mr. Wolfe is curious. Curious, I said, and irritable. Someone broke a seal, remade it badly, and then mailed the broken piece to an employee's home address like a calling card. Her eyes sharpened. They mailed it to Pomeroy. You know him. I work with him. Her mouth tightened. He is meticulous. He doesn't deserve this. Deserve doesn't enter into it, I said. Who does? She studied me for a moment, and I had the feeling she was deciding whether I was a waste of breath. Finally, she said, "Follow me." She rose and moved with the brisk certainty of someone used to being obeyed in rooms full of men with money. She led me down the hall to a locked door that looked like it belonged in a prison. A keypad, a heavy latch. No ornamentation. Just security and the promise of disappointment. She entered a code, produced a key from her pocket, and the door opened with a thick sigh. Inside was a room designed to make objects feel important. Controlled lighting, climate monitors, cases lined with felt, shelves of catalogued relics. It smelled faintly of leather and old dust, the scent of money aging. "The ledger is kept here," she said, and her voice changed slightly as if the room demanded a different register. I looked around. 2 keys? She nodded. Garnett has one. Sloane has one. I have neither. And yet someone got in without either, I said. Her lips thinned. Yes. She went to a cabinet set against the far wall. It was locked too, of course, and she opened it with another code. Inside was an empty slot lined with foam. "It was here," she said. "Not now," I asked. "It is downstairs," she said, and something close to disdain crossed her face. Sloane insisted it be moved to the viewing vault on the 3rd floor. He said it was safer there. "Safer how?" I asked. "Safer politically," she said. "He wanted fewer people aware of its location." "That's a funny way to treat something you don't want to be visible," I said. Her gaze snapped to me. Exactly. I walked the room slowly, not touching anything because I'm fond of keeping my fingers. My eyes went to the shelves, the cases, the corners. Then I noticed what Pomeroy had described, an access panel behind a shelf. The kind that a contractor forgets is a vulnerability until an insurance adjuster points it out. The shelf was slightly askew, just a hair off alignment with the floor markings that suggested it had been moved and replaced by someone who didn't know the room's habits. I crouched and looked. The panel screws were in place, but one was newer, bright metal among dull. I stood. "You noticed this?" Her eyes narrowed. Yes. The panel was not flush. Mr. Garnett dismissed it as a settling shelf. "Shelves don't settle," I said. "Buildings do. People do. Shelves just get moved." She didn't smile. "That is what I said." "Who has access to this floor?" I asked. She hesitated, then answered with reluctant precision. "Senior staff, security, the principals, and maintenance, when accompanied." "Maintenance," I repeated. "That's a nice wide gate." "It shouldn't be," she said sharply. "Not here." I nodded and let my eyes travel again. There was a camera in the corner, another above the door. "You have surveillance," I said. "Yes." She sounded bitter. And when I asked for the footage from the day of the broken seal, I was told the camera in this room was malfunctioning. I stared at her. Malfunctioning. Her jaw set. For precisely 2 hours, the exact 2 hours between my first viewing and my second. That was neat. Too neat, like a man arranging coins on a table to look accidental. "Who told you that?" I asked. "The head of security," she said. "Miles Quan." "Describe him." "Former police," she said. "Efficient. Quiet. Loyal to the firm, not to truth." "Good to know," I said. "And what about Mr. Garnett and Mr. Sloane? Which one looked like he was lying better?" Her eyes flashed. They both lie well. They have practice. I walked to the door and glanced back at her. Dr. Rudge, Wolfe asked me to speak to you before I spoke to anyone else. He'll want your opinion on the ledger itself. What makes it dangerous besides gossip value? Her gaze held mine, steady and cold. It isn't gossip, she said. It is accounting. Names and numbers tied to acts that were illegal then and are catastrophic now. Trusts, foundations, titles, reputations built on philanthropy that began as extortion. And the names, I said. The names, she agreed. If the ledger is authentic, and it is, it reaches into families and institutions that still exist, people who consider themselves untouchable. Then someone wants it out, I said, and someone wants it buried. And someone, she said softly, wants to control who gets ruined. That brought my mind back to wax seals remade badly. Not an amateur, just someone in a hurry. All right, I said. I'm going to see your principals. Then I'm going to meet Miles Kwan. If I don't come back, tell Wolfe I died resisting culture. She didn't blink. I would tell him you died being useful. That was her version of a compliment, I guess. I stepped out into the hall, and before she closed the door, she added, Mr. Goodwin. I turned. If you speak to Mr. Sloane, she said, watch his hands. His hands. They tremble, she said. Not from fear, from restraint. The door shut. I stood for a second, letting that settle. Trembling hands could mean rage, withdrawal, a medical condition, or a man holding himself back from doing something he badly wanted to do. Down the hall, a plaque pointed toward the principal's offices. I started walking, and as I did, I passed a maintenance door half open. Inside, I caught a glimpse of a rolling cart with tools and a coil of cable. A man in coveralls bent over it, his back to me. He straightened slightly, as if he'd sensed my eyes. Then he turned his head just enough for me to see the side of his face. Medium height, dark hair under a cap, no expression, and he slipped through the door and pulled it shut with careful quiet. I kept walking, but my pace didn't change, because when you notice something that might matter, the worst thing you can do is announce it with your feet. The ticket that led nowhere, Wolfe had called it, without calling it anything. But down here, in a building that ran on locks and silence, it was starting to feel like it led exactly where someone wanted it to, and I hadn't yet met the people who thought they were doing the leading. The principal's offices were at the end of the corridor, separated by a stretch of carpet that had been walked thin by men who thought every step was a transaction. I didn't hurry. The maintenance man I'd glimpsed hadn't looked surprised to see me, which meant either he belonged there or he was good at pretending he did. In a place like Garnett and Sloane, the difference mattered less than you'd think. Victor Garnett's name came first, etched into brass with the confidence of inheritance. His door was open, which in my experience either means a man has nothing to hide, or he wants you to think that. He was behind a broad desk, gray-haired, silver-spectacled, and dressed like a banker who had read one too many art catalogues. He looked up as I paused in the doorway, and his smile arrived before his eyes did. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, rising halfway, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" I could ask the same, I said, stepping in, "but I'll settle for answers." He gestured to a chair. "If this is about the Barnes ledger." "It is," I said, sitting without waiting for permission. "And about how someone accessed your secure room without your key or Mr. Sloane's." Mr. Garnett's smile tightened. "I understand you've spoken to Dr. Rudge." "I have," I said. "She's not fond of coincidences." "Nor am I," Garnett said smoothly, "which is why we're taking steps." "Such as?" I asked. He folded his hands on the desk, fingers interlaced with care. "Limiting access, reviewing security protocols, bringing in outside consultants." "Like Mr. Wolfe?" I asked. That made him blink, just once. "Mr. Wolfe is formidable, but this is a matter of internal concern." "Funny," I said. It stopped being internal when someone mailed a broken wax seal to one of your employees' home. Garnett's hands stilled. You're certain of that? Certain enough to say it out loud, I said. Who besides you, Mr. Sloane, Dr. Rudge, security, and maintenance has access to the building after hours? He frowned, as if the question offended his sense of order. No one without clearance. And clearances controlled by? I asked. Security, he said. Miles Kwan. Former police, I said. Efficient. Quiet. Garnett nodded. Yes, he came highly recommended. So do men who later disappoint, I said. When did the camera malfunction? His lips thinned. I was told it was a temporary electrical issue. For exactly 2 hours, I said. Convenient. Unfortunate, he corrected, but not proof of malfeasance. No, I agreed, just of opportunity. He leaned back. Mr. Goodwin, we are a reputable firm. Our interests lie in discretion. And yet the ledger is scheduled for a private viewing, I said, with printed tickets. His eyes flicked to a stack of papers on his desk, then back to me. Plans evolve. Who evolved them? I asked. Garnett smiled again, this time thinner. Mr. Sloane has strong opinions about maximizing value. I'm sure he does, I said. Where can I find him? Garnett gestured toward the door across the hall. Next door, if he's available. Thanks, I said, standing. One more thing. When you argue with people behind closed doors, you might want to keep your voice down. Sound carries. His jaw tightened. Did you hear something? Enough, I said. And it didn't sound like a man confident of buying silence once. I left him sitting very still. Damon Sloane's office door was closed. I knocked and heard a voice say, "Yes?" in a tone that suggested interruption was a personal insult. I went in. Sloane was younger than Garnett, mid-50s maybe, with dark hair gone iron gray at the temples and a face that had been handsome until ambition sharpened it. He stood by the window when I entered, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the city like it owed him something. He turned, and his eyes assessed me with brisk calculation. You're Wolfe's man. That's what they tell me, I said. You must be Sloane. I am, he said, and I don't appreciate strangers prying into my business. Then you should lock it better, I said. Someone pried into your secure room. His hands tightened, just as Dr. Rudge had predicted. Not shaking, trembling, controlled. We're handling it, he said. I've heard that line before, I said. Usually right before someone loses control of the narrative. His eyes flashed. What do you want? I want to know why you moved the ledger downstairs, I said. And why tickets were printed. He exhaled sharply. Because secrecy breeds suspicion. A controlled viewing reassures certain parties. Which parties? I asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. Collectors, institutions. Names, I said. He laughed, short and humorless. You think I'll hand you a list? I think you'll do whatever keeps you in control, I said. Right now you're not. His jaw worked. The ledger belongs to a private estate. It has the right to sell. And the right to destroy reputations, I said. Whose? He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You don't understand the scale of this. I understand pressure, I said. You're under it. From people who don't like surprises. His hands trembled again, and this time he didn't hide it. Those people built things. Endowments, hospitals, universities. And themselves, I said, on someone else's misery. He turned away, staring at the window again. If that ledger becomes public, chaos follows. Or justice, I said. He spun back. Justice is a luxury word. Stability matters. Not to Wolfe, I said. He prefers truth. Sloane's mouth twisted. Truth is negotiable. Not here, he said. Who has seen the ledger besides you, Garnett, Rudge, and Pomeroy? He hesitated too long. No one. I watched his hands. They clenched, then relaxed. Maintenance? I asked. His eyes flicked away. Security oversees maintenance. Security reports to you, I said. His silence answered me. All right, I said. I'm going to speak to Miles Quan. You'll do no such thing, he snapped. I smiled. Watch me. Quan's office was down a side corridor near the service elevator, which made sense. Security likes to be close to exits. The plaque on the door was smaller, less confident. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I stepped back and waited. After a moment, footsteps approached from behind. I turned to see the maintenance man from earlier, pushing his cart, eyes down. Miles Quan around? I asked casually. The man stiffened. Don't know, he said, and his voice was wrong. Too careful. What's your name? I asked. Eddie, he said. Last name? I asked. He hesitated. I got to get back to work. He started to move past me. Hold it, I said, and put a hand on the cart. He froze. That panel upstairs, I said softly. Behind the shelf. You open it often. His jaw tightened. I just do what I'm told. By whom? I asked. Before he could answer, the service elevator dinged behind us, and the doors slid open. Miles Quan stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the posture of a man who had learned how to wait without fidgeting. His eyes went from me to the maintenance man to the cart, and something flickered. Recognition, maybe annoyance. Problem? Quan asked. I smiled. Just chatting about access panels and broken seals. Quan's gaze hardened. That's security business. Good, I said. Because I'm asking about a camera that failed for exactly 2 hours. He didn't blink. Equipment malfunctions. So do alibis, I said. Who ordered the ledger moved? Sloan, Quan said flatly. And who ordered the cameras down? I asked. He met my eyes. No one ordered anything. Funny, I said, because someone left evidence behind. Sloppy evidence. Quan's mouth tightened. You should leave. Not yet, I said. Because Wolfe hates incompetence, and someone here has been very incompetent, or very arrogant. Quan took a step closer, his voice low. You're in over your head. I thought of Wolfe, sitting immobile in his chair, tying strings. Not really, I said. I'm exactly where he wants me. Quan's eyes flicked just briefly, toward the maintenance man. That was enough. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there with their secrets and their fear. In the lobby, I found a phone and called Wolfe. Dr. Rudge confirmed tampering, I said when he answered. Access panel, camera outage, maintenance involved. Security complicit or careless. Sloan moved the ledger and pushed for the viewing. Garnett plays dumb. And there's a maintenance man who does what he's told. Wolfe was silent for a moment. Then he said, Excellent. Bring Mr. Quan to me. I blinked. Bring him how? That, Wolfe said calmly, is your problem. I hung up and smiled thinly. The ticket hadn't led nowhere after all. It had led straight back to Wolfe's office. And now the question wasn't who wanted the ledger. It was who Wolfe wanted to watch squirm when he asked about it. Pomeroy looked as if the floor might give way under him when I brought him into the office. Wolfe didn't acknowledge him at first. He sat with his fingers steepled, eyes half-lidded, listening to the small sounds of the house, the tick of the clock, the faint clink from the kitchen, Saul Panza's breathing, steady and patient. Mr. Pomeroy, Wolfe said at last, you have just received a message. Yes, Pomeroy said. A woman, she attempted intimidation, Wolfe said mildly. Poorly. Sit down. Pomeroy sat. Wolfe turned his head slightly. "Mr. Panzer, thank you. You will remain." Saul nodded once and leaned against the wall, becoming part of it. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Inspector Kramer, broad-shouldered and scowling, coat still buttoned like he might need to leave in a hurry. "All right, Wolfe," he said, stepping in. "You said break-in?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "and manipulation. You will be useful if you remain silent until I finish speaking." Kramer opened his mouth, then shut it. He took a chair and glared at me instead. Wolfe looked at me. "Mr. Goodwin, you will telephone Garnett and Sloan. Invite Mr. Garnett, Mr. Poole, Sloan, Dr. Rudge, and Mr. Quan to come here at once. You will tell them the police are present. You will say no more." I reached for the phone. "And if they ask why?" Wolfe's eyes flicked to the paperweight, still an inch off. "Tell them my office has been entered without permission." That did it. Within 40 minutes, the brownstone was hosting more outsiders than Wolfe liked in a month. Victor Garnett arrived first, flustered but dignified, clutching his hat like a talisman. Damon Sloan followed, jaw tight, eyes darting. Dr. Celia Rudge came last, composed, observant, her gaze taking in the room as if cataloguing it. Miles Quan arrived with her, silent, his face a neutral mask that had developed cracks. Wolfe did not rise. "You are here," Wolfe said, "because each of you has contributed, directly or indirectly, to an act of coercion, trespass, and attempted manipulation." Garnett protested at once. "This is outrageous." "Silence," Wolfe said, and the word landed like a gavel. Garnett closed his mouth. Wolfe's eyes went to Quan. "Mr. Quan, you supervised security at Garnett and Sloan. You arranged a camera malfunction lasting precisely 2 hours. You authorized maintenance access to a concealed service panel. You facilitated the removal and replacement of a wax seal. And today, someone acting in your interest entered my office." Quan's jaw flexed. "You can't prove that." "No," Wolfe agreed, "but I can explain it." He turned slightly toward Dr. Rudge. "The Barnes ledger is authentic. Its danger lies not merely in its content, but in its specificity. It does not accuse broadly. It names, it quantifies, it dates, it connects." Dr. Rudge nodded once. Wolfe continued. "The ledger's appearance threatened several parties. One, represented by Mr. Sloan, wished to control its exposure, sell it discreetly, profit, and limit collateral damage. Another party wished to suppress it entirely. A third wished to alter it." Sloan stiffened. "Alter, yes," Wolfe said. "A single substituted page, a removed name, a re-inked figure, enough to redirect guilt." He looked at Quan again. "You were tasked with gaining access, but you are not clever enough to forge history. So you sought leverage." Wolfe's gaze shifted to Pomeroy. Mr. Pomeroy was chosen as the lever. He was visible, expendable, and close enough to blame. Pomeroy swallowed. Wolfe leaned back a fraction. The ticket mailed to him was not an invitation. It was a warning. Attend and accept your role. Decline and be destroyed. The broken wax seal mailed to him was proof of reach. Garnett's voice trembled. "This is absurd. Who would—" "The Halbrook Charitable Trust," Wolfe said. The room went still. Sloane's face drained of color. Garnett stared. Quan's eyes flicked once, just once, toward the floor. Wolfe said, "A foundation built on philanthropy and silence. Its early endowment relied upon transactions recorded in the Barnes ledger, extortion, bribery, coercion disguised as generosity. Exposure would unravel decades of curated virtue." Kramer shifted in his chair. Wolfe went on. "The trust wished the ledger neutralized. They employed Mr. Quan, who, as a former police officer with access to security, was positioned to act without suspicion. He arranged the camera outage. He enlisted maintenance. He entered the secure room." Quan spoke. his voice tight. I didn't change anything. Correct, Wolfe said. You could not. That is why you needed time, to identify which pages mattered. That is why you attempted to learn what I knew. That is why my office was entered. Kwon's eyes hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. Wolfe looked at me. Mr. Goodwin. I reached into my pocket and produced the envelope Saul had described, the one he'd lifted from Kwon's coat with professional discretion. I slid it onto the desk and opened it. Inside were freshly printed pages, high-quality reproductions. Ledger pages. Dr. Rudge leaned forward, her composure cracking for the first time. Those are facsimiles? Yes, Wolfe said. Marked copies. The trust needed to know which names appeared, which transactions could be contested, which could not. Kwon's shoulders sagged, just slightly. Wolfe finished calmly. The trust's mistake was arrogance. They believed intimidation sufficient. They underestimated Mr. Pomeroy's intelligence, Dr. Rudge's integrity, Mr. Panzer's efficiency, and my intolerance for intrusion. He looked at Kramer. Inspector, Mr. Kwon has conspired to obstruct, trespass, and facilitate the alteration of evidence. The facsimiles in that envelope connect him directly to the trust. Kramer stood. Kwon, you're under arrest. Kwon didn't resist. He just looked tired. Garnett found his voice. And us? Wolfe regarded him coolly. Mr. Garnett, your sin is cowardice. You suspected wrongdoing and chose silence. That may interest the district attorney. Sloan opened his mouth, then closed it. Wolfe turned to him. Mr. Sloan, your sin is ambition. You attempted to profit while pretending neutrality. You failed. Dr. Rudge stood straighter. The ledger? Wolfe nodded. Will be secured. Its disposition is no longer your firm's decision. Kramer gestured to Kwon. Let's go. When the door closed behind them, the room felt lighter, as if a bad smell had left. Wolfe looked at Pomeroy. Mr. Pomeroy, you will be called as a witness. You will tell the truth. That will suffice. Pomeroy nodded, tears unshed but close. Garnett and Sloan were dismissed without ceremony. Dr. Rudge paused at the door. You never touched the ledger, she said to Wolfe. No, Wolfe said. I did not need to. She inclined her head and left. Silence returned, tentative but real. Fritz appeared at the doorway. Dinner is ready, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe sighed, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. Excellent. Kramer lingered. You could have told me sooner. Wolfe waved a hand. You would have interfered. Kramer snorted and left. I sank into my chair and lit a cigarette. So the ticket didn't lead nowhere. No, Wolfe said. It led precisely where it was meant to. That was its flaw. Which was? I asked. Wolfe settled back. It assumed I would follow. Fritz served dinner. Wolfe ate with satisfaction restored. After a while, he said, men who build their virtue on concealment are always astonished when a record survives them. I nodded. Paper has a long memory. Wolfe glanced at me. So do I. Outside, the brownstone returned to its usual quiet, unbreached and unimpressed. And somewhere downtown, a ledger waited patiently to remind important people that the past, unlike tickets, almost always leads somewhere.